Kansas, or the Sunflower State, is known for the Wizard of Oz, a bunch of spooky tornadoes, and what many professional barbecue cooks would, arguably of course, consider to be the best bite in American barbecue. Kansas City, or KC to locals, is situated right on the border of Missouri and Kansas, and as you can imagine, the Midwest energy could not be higher. Neither could the rivalry between the two states. But I'm not here to talk to you about Civil War era beef. The beef that we're talking about today is a lot more tasty. That's right, we're talking Kansas City barbecue, specifically the Kansas City brisket burnt end. Welcome back to Cooking the States, a series where we cook a famous dish from a different state in every episode in an attempt to get to the bottom of the true identity of American food. Every summer, the Windy City Smokeout pops up here in Chicago. The festival attracts barbecue experts from various regions all over the country. It's very rare to have so much barbecue royalty in one place, and the timing worked out perfectly because I was able to link up with this legend to ask him his top 3 tips for smoking better burnt ends at home. So I'm here with Jeremy Yoder of MadScientistBBQ, a barbecue legend himself, and YouTube extraordinaire. What's up, dude?
Dude, it's great to be here in Chicago. It's a lot of fun.
Heck yeah. So we're gonna give you 3 tips on how to cook better burnt ends at home. For a beginner, or even if you're a little more grizzled, a little more veteran, these points are gonna help you because it's from this guy. All right, first thing, Kansas City barbecue. How do we start?
So because it's so important in Kansas City, they have a very defined way to do it. But I think at home, you can do it the way you like. So what I would say, traditionally, you're gonna use the point and cube that up. But don't neglect the end cut on the flat. So that very first cut, because it's got 3 sides of smoke flavor, so it's a big punch of smoke flavor, which is really nice.
Okay, so point 1, don't neglect the flat.
Correct. And then the second thing that I would say that's really important is that you don't overcook the point if you're gonna use the point, because there's already so much marbling that it's gonna be tender and juicy anyway. But if it's so tender that when you try to cube it up, the cubes fall apart, it's not gonna look good. And with brisket burn ends, presentation is key.
Presentation is key, you heard it here first. So when talking sauce, how are we gonna approach this with burnt ends?
The way I like to do it is I like to thin out the sauce. So if you're gonna use a regular brown barbecue sauce from the store, it gets kind of thick and gloopy, so you'll try to set the sauce, but it doesn't look even, doesn't have the sheen that you want when you have other parts that are still runny. So I like to thin it out, and then I like to use that, and it gets the perfect level of sheen, the perfect level of sweet, and you have a beautifully balanced bite.
And you can do that with hot sauce, with
water, vinegar, any liquid that you like. And if you like Worcestershire, totally. Go ahead and use
flavorful liquid.
Exactly.
Flavorful liquid.
Yep.
Right on. Alright, Kansas City barbecue sauce is probably the most classic of the American barbecue sauces. And I say that because most of the stuff that you're going to find on the shelf at the grocery store is of the Kansas City style variety. And sure, there are a fair amount of ingredients that go into it, but to be honest, it couldn't be easier to make. Start by adding a tablespoon of neutral oil to a pan over medium heat. Dump in half of a diced yellow onion, 4 roughly chopped garlic cloves, and an inch knob of ginger chopped. Season with a pinch of salt, then sweat the veg down for 5 minutes until soft and the onions are translucent. If the onions begin to take on color and start to burn, just lower the heat a little bit. We really don't want the smaller garlic and ginger to burn. Now is the time to stir in our spices. That's 2 tablespoons of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of chipotle powder, and a half teaspoon of MSG. Stir that around to coat the vegetables, then let it cook for 1 more minute. Now pour in 1 cup of ketchup, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of molasses, 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire McDerber sauce, 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 cups of stock, then season to taste with salt and black pepper. Stir that all up until combined, then let the whole thing reduce down by roughly 1/3. Now, it's optional, but I like to add a bump of xanthan gum to my barbecue sauce. It helps hold the sauce together, it helps smooth it out a little bit, and it also gives it this super clean sheen and shine about it. Again, totally optional. Once that's smooth, let it cool down a bit, then pour it into a resealable container. You can pop that in the fridge until we need it later. Next, we need a flavorful rub that's powerful enough to stand up to wood smoke, but nuanced enough to not overpower the overall taste of the brisket. It all starts with whole spices. That's 3 tablespoons of toasted black peppercorns, 1 whole star anise, 1 whole mace pod, and a tablespoon of celery seeds. Blitz that up until chunky, then add in 1/3 cup paprika, 3 tablespoons garlic powder, 2 tablespoons onion powder, and 1 teaspoon mustard powder. Pulse or stir that a few times until all the spices are intermingled, then store that into a resealable container for later. And next up is the brisket. This is a full prime packer brisket, which means that it has the point and flat attached. If your local grocery store doesn't have one, try a butcher, or if you have access to Costco, they carry them now too. If you're new to this and or are intimidated by the whole meat fabrication component of cooking a brisket, let me sum things up for you in a concise and easy to understand manner. Our goal here is twofold. First up, we need to remove most of the excess fat and silver skin by trimming it away with a thin, sharp knife. Your goal is to make shallow strokes along the brisket to remove enough fat from the cap until you're left with an even 1/4 inch of fat atop the entire brisket. Do not throw away the fat though, we're gonna use it later, so just make a little trim pile, set it aside for now. Second, we need to remove all of the pieces that are going to burn up in the long smoking process. Slice off any parts of the brisket, meat, and fat that are thinner than the width of your thumb and toss them in the trim pile. If you come across a pointed edge or any flimsy flaps or pieces of meat hanging from the brisket, get rid of those too. Once the brisket is trimmed and shaped, all you need to do is season it. I like to trim the brisket off the day before I plan to cook it, just so it doesn't dig into the, actual smoking and cooking time of the brisket. Believe me, scrambling last minute at 5 in the morning is not fun and is a great way to scare yourself away from barbecuing as a whole. Best get it done beforehand. Once the brisket is prepared, you will be left with a fair amount of trim, and much of that will be fat. We need to render said fat so that we can pour it over the brisket while it rests. To do so, simply pop all of the fat into a large enough saucepan, set the flame to low, and stir things around every once in a while until the trim chunks look like really gnarly, small, unedible chicharrones. Let the fat cool down a bit in the pot, then transfer it to a container and toss it in the fridge until we need it later. Beef fat is called tallow, and yes, it solidifies in the fridge, so take it out a couple of hours before you plan to use it, and or toss it in the microwave to soften it up if need be. There's no way to dance around it. Smoking a brisket takes time. Like 9 to 12 hours of time to cook, then another chunk to properly rest it. And a lot of the times you're gonna want to wake up at the crack of dawn to start the brisket, but lucky for me I had a bit of company this morning. I'm starting this 15-pound brisket at 5 in the morning to have it cooked by mid to late afternoon. Begin by seasoning the whole shadiddly liberally all over with salt, all over the sides, all over the back, everywhere. It's really hard to over-season a brisket, so don't be shy. Next, grab some of that rub that we made earlier and sprinkle that all over in the exact same manner. Now let's take a walk outside. Take your smoker up to 225 degrees and add a few chunks of wood. I'm using pecan today. Situate the brisket in the smoker fat side up so that the point is nearest to the firebox, nearest to the flame. Then go ahead and poke a probe thermometer directly into the center of that point. Smoke le brisket between 225 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours. At the 3-hour mark, spray the brisket with a solution of half vinegar and half water or beer. Do your best to avoid spraying the fat of the brisket, which can affect the rate in which it renders. We're just spritzing it a bit to stop the meat from drying out completely. You don't gotta give it a shower, just give it a couple of sprays. Spray the brisket every 30 minutes to an hour for the next few hours until the internal temperature of the brisket point reaches 180 degrees Fahrenheit and the fat is fully rendered. And you'll be able to tell if that fat is fully rendered when you could push into it and it sort of just breaks on you instead of bouncing back. Once you get to this stage, remove the brisket from the smoke. Lay down a few sheets of butcher paper, then drizzle some of that rendered beef tallow directly onto said paper. Plop the entire brisket on top, fat side up, then drizzle with a bit more tallow. Wrap the brisket up so that it's fully encased in that paper, and again the fat side is situated up. Then set the whole thing onto a tray and bake in a 300 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven until the internal temperature of the brisket point reads 205 degrees Fahrenheit. After your brisket comes to temp comes the part that nobody loves. We must now rest the brisket to attain ultimate juiciness. That means that we are going to wrap the brisket up in a cutesy little bundle and a bunch of little cute little blankets like that, just to keep it warm and let it come down to at least 150 degrees Fahrenheit before slicing, which can take a few hours. The professional barbecue lords that I spoke with at the Smokeout recommended a 12-hour rest, and some people even said longer than that. I'm going to rest the brisket in my cooler that I've pre-warmed with a pot of boiling water, which is going to help it retain more heat than it would otherwise. Wrap her up, stow her away, and we will come back to unwrap this beauty very soon. Sleep, child. Okay, the next day our brisket is rested and ready to be sliced. Alright, moment of truth. This is what we've all been waiting for, peeps. Oh, Wow. You could just see that just wanting to fall apart. So there's two muscles here, two important things here. The point and the flat, which we talked about. So our goal is to basically remove the point from that flat so that we can take the point and do with it what we will to make burnt ends. The division and the muscle, you can kind of just see the flat runs like this and the point is on top here. So I can even just take my hand, this is wild, look at this. And you can just start to even remove it if it's tender enough. I'm just going to take a sharp knife and work that point right off. Go ahead and set that flat aside for something else because we are going to be focusing on the point. Just look at that. This is why the point of the brisket is so prized. It's meaty and loaded with intermuscular fat, which is why it's so dang juicy and unctuous. Do your best to slice 1-inch wide strips of point, making sure to cut across the grain of the muscle. Once you got your strips cut, set them horizontally and use a long, sharp knife to carefully slice 1-inch cubes. Most barbecue guys recommend using a serrated knife for this, a bread knife gets the job done pretty well, but I was feeling rebellious and just wanted to use my slicer. No matter which sword you decide to wield, be careful not to smash through the tender pieces of meat. We're going for nice chunks, not shredded brisket. Finishing the burnt ends. Things are cut, all of our sauces, mise en place out, ready to go. We're just gonna pop a little bit of sauce over the top of these, followed by the remaining Kansas City barbecue spice rub that we made earlier. And remember, if you're adding sauce to these, you don't want them to swim in the sauce. If you see a layer of sauce in the pan, you've gone too far. You just need to coat them oh so slightly so that they caramelize in the oven. Drizzle on ya sauce, dust on ya dust, then add a few additional knobs o' butter if you're feeling naughty. Then just toss the burnt ends to coat before finishing them off in a 300-degree Fahrenheit oven for about 30 minutes or until the sauce is nice and caramelized on there. Once your burnt ends have done time in the heat dungeon, you should be left with something like this. Okay, one day later, some odd hours, and this is what we're left with. Beautiful, marvelous burnt ends. You got your crispy, barky outside, your fatty, succulent inside. It's coated with a spicy, sweet, thick sauce. I mean, it sounds like it ticks all the boxes texturally and flavor-wise what you would want to put in your mouth, right? Classic sides, we got the little dill pickles, we got the unis, that's a little side of barbecue sauce, which some people like to indulge in more of that, so brisket from the point. One sauceless first. It's so good! Wow, guys. I'm a guy on a camera telling you how good this is, but it's everything I just told you. It's unctuous, it's fatty, it's sweet, it's got a little bit of a kick, it's charry. Look at that smoke rang. There you have it, the barbecue item that put Kansas City on the map in the barbecue circuit. Burnt ends. In my experience, whenever I hear people talk about Kansas here in the States, people tend to shudder. They think it sucks, to be honest. They think it's brown grass, tornadoes, bad politics, and probably more brown grass. There's a little more to it than that. I got my undergrad degree from the University of Kansas in journalism, and man, my time in Lawrence could only be described as awesome. I loved it there. Rolling green hills, warmer winters than Chicago, and super nice people. It was a great place to live. And of course, their BBQ, as you could see, is no joke. So if you're ever taking a road trip through KC or the Kansas area, don't forget to stop off. You're not gonna be mad you did. Take it from me. Tell them I sent you. Naturally, the next state in our alphabetical adventure across America is the other K-state, Kentucky. Woo! If you think that you know what we're going to make for that state, comment below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, insert YouTube guide jargon here, and I shall see you next time. Ta-ta, Toto.